Just a reminder on the best way to participate in webinars with Momentum is if you could please mute your phone. You do that by pressing *6 on the keyboard. It just prevents any background noise coming through, which can make it difficult for people to hear sometimes. We'll be kicking off in about another 2 minutes. It looks like we've got just about all of our attendees logged on to the session, so we'll get started shortly. Okay, so we're going to make a start now. Good morning, everyone. It's Al Emery here from Momentum, and today we're going to be taking you through some add-ons or extensions that we've developed for EXO that a number of our customers use, and they pretty much extend what standard functionality might or might not do in either EXO Business or job costing. And, you know, in the right business can add a lot of additional value compared to what you might have out of the box. So we generally only develop add-ons if there's sufficient demand from a customer or customers to, I guess, you know, round out the functionality of particular areas of EXO or provide some functionality that doesn't exist at all. And then those get polished off a bit so that they might be more broadly appealing to our customers. So the three we've got on the agenda today is Timesheet Advantage, Job Cost Advantage, and Approval Advantage. Time permitting, we might touch on one or two others. And what I thought I'd do is actually go through them in reverse order, because looking at the people who are attending the webinar, not all of the customers attending the webinar use EXO job costing. So therefore the job costing add-ons may not be relevant for everybody, whereas Approval Advantage at the bottom potentially is relevant for everyone. So I'm actually going to start with that module, and then we'll go through the others as we go. So Approval Advantage is basically a combination of automatic document storage of supplier or creditor invoices, as well as extending on the standard features of what creditor invoice approval does out of the box in MYOB EXO. So I'll explain a couple of standard things first. Firstly, EXO has a standard feature which is activated in the configuration module to enable authorization on purchase orders and to enable authorization on creditor payments. The creditor payment one is slightly misnamed. It really means authorization on creditor invoices so that they can be paid, as opposed to authorization of the payments themselves. So those features can be turned on or off. when they're turned on, the next thing that you do is for individual employees, you would set up their authorisation levels. So say Bill Smith, on the authority tab, can be given a creditor invoice authority limit, a stock purchase order authority limit, and a non-stock purchase order authority limit. And those basically dictate the amount of any individual invoice or purchase order that that person can authorise. Okay? So I'm logged on as EXO admin. And the EXO admin account can authorise creditor invoices and purchase orders up to $99,999. Okay. What the creditor invoice approval feature does is, in the creditor payment processor, you physically won't be able to select certain invoices for payment unless they've been authorised for payment. Okay? So using standard features, that can happen in a couple of different places. Any individual supplier, you can go to the Transactions tab and you will see a field for authorised. Okay? In addition to that, I've added a couple of additional columns so I can see the date an invoice was authorised and the staff number of the person who authorised it. To authorise an invoice using standard features, you can basically right-click on the invoice and authorise it, which automatically records the date and time that occurred and the staff number of the person who did it. In doing that, obviously, I might want to look at that invoice and see what it actually was, because if I'm the approver, I may not even know what it was. So you can double-click on it and it will show what's been entered into EXO, and that can be useful. But what can be more useful is actually viewing a hard copy of the invoice itself, and that's often what happens in businesses, is the hard copy gets passed around to be actually physically signed before the invoice is paid. So that adds another option where you might attach documents to the creditor and attach a copy of the invoice. But it does mean that within EXO you kind of need to jump around from supplier to supplier, go to the Transactions tab, look at the invoice, go to the Documents tab, look at the document. So that's one of the things that we had some feedback that was a little time-consuming. The other area was a number of our customers have multiple EXO databases or multiple companies, and they wanted their company directors or CFO to be able to view and approve invoices and purchase orders for multiple companies all in the one screen. So that's kind of what the design behind Approval Advantage was. Approval Advantage launches off a menu within EXO Business, and there's a bit of setup involved. So, for example, in addition to setting up authority limits against individual people, you can set up what are called groups and allocate individual people to groups within which they might authorise transactions. So, for example, certain people might be able to authorise invoices for branch 1 but not branch 2. Or other people might be able to authorise invoices for all companies, so you might have a global group in which a particular person sits. So you can create a structure of who can authorise what. That's what that area does. Then there's two additional things we do. One is we set up a folder on the server where the supplier, the scanned copies of the invoices are going to be saved. So we create a folder, you can decide where that is, and that's where the filing system is going to file the copies of the invoices that have been scanned in or PDF versions your suppliers have sent you. And then thirdly, each person can have different authority limits. So this is really a replica of the setup start screen that we were looking at, but it gives some additional options around what each person can do. They can view, they can approve, or they can't do either. And it also gives the option to say this person can only approve in branch 1, not branch 2, 3, or 4. Okay? If you're running multiple Exto databases, then you'd actually have the same options for the different company names that might exist, so that one person could approve invoices in several companies or selected branches within certain companies. So there's quite a degree of control you've got about who can approve what in the system. Once you've set it up, then basically you're filtering the screen to look at, say, any invoice that's either, let's say, not approved, so it's awaiting approval. And we're basically providing visibility in the screen of what company this relates to, what branch it relates to, if it relates to a job, what job is it, what's the invoice number, invoice date, invoice number, amount of the invoice, XGST, purchase order number, what's been invoiced against that purchase order, who the supplier is. Pardon me, sorry, I was checking a couple of settings there. And then each transaction has a status, okay, which can be awaiting approval, queried, what have you. Right, so a common scenario, and we want the person approving these invoices to be able to see the invoices. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is, and this would be pretty common, we have suppliers that send us invoices by email, and those they'll be usually a PDF, and they'll have any old file name on the PDF. And we also might receive invoices physically and scan those on the photocopier, and they'll get scanned with a particular file name. Okay. Now, the user can basically drag and drop a scan or a PDF onto the grid, and you'll see that that scan has just disappeared. And I'll do another one, so I know that this scan relates to this invoice, and that one disappears. Okay. At the same time, it creates a hyperlink on that transaction, so the person doing the approving can actually view the physical invoice. What that's actually doing is the software is automatically creating a folder under our supplier documents folder for each company, each year, each supplier, and then based on the fact that we dragged and dropped what was a scan on this invoice number, the software has renamed this PDF to invoice number.pdf. So it can easily be referenced for future, and it's basically filed there for as long as you wish to retain it from a tax point of view or an audit point of view. So the person approving, before they approve this invoice, can now actually view it, and it opens a scan of the invoice, and they can see exactly what the goods or services were on that invoice. If they don't want to approve it, they can query it, and they might put a note on it to say, whatever they like, and the status of that invoice changes to queried, and another user can go back and check that comment, and it will be date, time, and user stamped so that somebody else might answer the query. If it's approved, the approver just clicks on the tick box, and that has the effect of, in XO Business, setting that invoice as approved, able to be paid. Okay? So let's have a look at Jensen and Rothville's supplier account. Okay, so that invoice number, we can see has been approved today, 1 minute ago, by me on staff number 8, okay? And also the document is automatically stored against this supplier by Approval Advantage, so I can easily open that same tax invoice from within XO or within the Approval Advantage application. So what the solution's really providing is the ability for people who are accounts payable people to basically drag and drop copies of invoices against the transaction so they get automatically filed for you and also updated so that the person needing to approve them can view them as well as approve them. Makes that whole process a lot more efficient. And it also means that the people doing the approving can say, all right, well, let's just look at a particular supplier and anything that needs to be approved for them. Okay, so they can filter a supplier at a time, or all suppliers. They can filter on dates. They can filter on just particular companies or even particular jobs, so 1058. That shows just invoices relating to that particular job. So those are all, you know, small but important features that the standard invoice approval in XO doesn't do quite so elegantly, and that's sort of the reason why this module was developed, is to make that process more efficient and particularly make the filing of creditor invoices effectively paper-based, because if you receive it via email as a PDF, you can drag and drop it straight onto the transaction. If you receive it in hard copy, you can scan it and drag and drop it onto the transaction, and the filing basically happens. So I go back to that example again, go to my temporary folder where my scans are, drag and drop that one. That automatically gets moved to supplier documents, this company, this year, this supplier, this transaction. So that's Approval Advantage from a creditor invoice approval perspective, and basically the same features are available for purchase orders. Okay? So purchase orders, if I go back to XO's standard functionality, if the purchase order approval feature is turned on, then a purchase order created by somebody that's above their limit will go to a status of awaiting authorization, and somebody who can approve it can right-click on that purchase order and authorize it, which then means it can be printed or emailed or sent to the supplier. Okay? So what That feature works quite nicely with EXO alerts turned on. You can have emails happening to the authoriser and the requester. The only thing it doesn't do is give a person, say, visibility of unauthorised purchase orders across all companies, and also with the ability to sort of filter by job and that sort of thing. So we figured we'd include both authorisation options within the application because depending on the business, they might need both. So it just extends on the features of what standard EXO does and makes it a bit more elegant, and particularly from the accounts payable side, handles all of the document filing and storage for you. Okay, so that's Approval Advantage. Like most of our modules, once it's installed, it just launches from a menu in EXO, doesn't require a separate login, and is fairly straightforward to get set up and running. All right, so I'm going to next look at, I'm going in reverse order, I'm going to next look at Job Cost Advantage. So this is purely for businesses running EXO job costing, and over time there's been a number of requests that customers have had just to make life a little bit easier in job costing, particularly from a quoting point of view, and also more recent times from a resource scheduling point of view. Okay, so let's take a look at that one. Right, so I'm using EXO Job Costing, and Job Cost Advantage is launched from within a job, the only place it will launch from. So if we pick a job, when Job Cost Advantage is installed, the number 1 button is normally what is available to open that application. Takes a couple of seconds to refresh when first launched. After that, it'll open and close very readily. And there's about 10 key features in Job Cost Advantage that people use on a regular basis. So the first one is an option to add multiple kits. So before I show that, I'll explain what that really means by way of how kits work in EXO, and then we'll come back to it. So in EXO, a kit can be used in a job quote to basically include a bunch of components from a bill of material, and it's quite easy to add a kit to a job. That's standard feature. But what isn't handled is sub-assemblies or master or sub-kits, if you like, as a standard feature. So let's say, for example, that we've got our engine, and that's a kit, and it also has an applicable stock code, which is the finished good, if you like, that gets created from this bill of material. But let's say the starter motor is also a finished good, and it has its own kit. So it's really a sub-assembly, because to make the engine, we need to make the starter motor. Okay, so I'm going to Create a new kit. Which links to that finished good. And in this kit, I'm going to add a few components. Which is what we need, raw materials, etc., to create the starter motor. Takes 1.5 hours to build it. So effectively that starter motor is now a sub-assembly. And what we want to do is, let's say we're quoting a particular job and we're quoting the engine, not using the kit, we're using the finished good as the item that goes into the job. And we're going to sell that for $6,000. So depending on the style of business, particularly for businesses that use job costing for manufacturing, if that job goes ahead, they really need to load the bill of materials for the engine and any sub-assembly relating to that, okay? So that's where job cost advantage comes in. Add multiple kits. That simply executes it. And basically what happens is the stock code for the engine gets removed. It gets replaced by the bill of material for the engine with the same quantity as what was there for the stock code. And it adds any sub-kits or sub-assemblies that will relate to that engine. Okay? We've got customers of ours with up to, say, 100 sub-assemblies or sub-kits that are basically using this as what in a manufacturing system you might call a bill of material explosion. So that's pretty much what Job Cost Advantage does that feature. Secondly, there's a feature called common phrases. So common phrases just can make life a little bit nicer when you're typing up a quote or entering text into Excel. So the description tab is commonly used for that, and it might have inclusions, exclusions, what have you, and you can manually type as much as you like. And there's a standard feature in Excel called common phrases where you go right-click, insert common phrases, and then you can create a phrase that you're intending to use repetitively, such as so you can add that phrase, and then at any time you can retrieve it back from your list. Okay? That's not a bad little feature. What it doesn't do is allow you to choose what order these phrases get created in, and if you imagine, you might end up with a pretty long list if they're just randomly in the order that they were created, or even alphabetic. It can be get a little bit unwieldy. So Job Cost Advantage allows you to expand on that a little. All right? So it still shows the standard phrases that already exist, but you might want to put them into certain categories and put them in a particular order. Okay, so you can create what's called a group, and this might be project, quote, standard terms, for example, within which you can then add as many comments or phrases as you like. in whatever order you like. So basically, you know, create a standard list of terms that you may wish to use depending on what type of job or quote you're actually working on. Once you've done those, you can then select multiple, copy those, and paste them to the screen. So it's just a bit of a time saver and allows you to have a bit more organisation around how common phrases work for you. So, handy feature. Okay, the next one is deleting quote lines. So again, this is just an extension to improve the quoting process and speed things up. So if we look at this engine bill of material, what some customers do is they'll create a bill of material or a kit, and a number of the components in that kit are optional. Okay, so as a standard, they would set the bill of material up so the quantity for those optional items is 0, because they're only going to put a quantity against them if they're going to use them in that quote. Okay, and that's all well and good. You can manually remove any line you like in EXO from a kit or from a quote in general, but if it's part of a kit, you have to right-click on that line and remove it. You can't select any particular line because ticking one line in a kit automatically ticks all the others, so you can't sort of quickly delete multiple lines. All right? So our feature just makes that happen. So you've got Job Cost Advantage open, delete quote lines. It's basically picking up any quote line with a quantity of 0. You can then deselect some of them if you wish to, otherwise basically hit delete, does it, save, and those lines are gone. So it's just a little bit of a time saver compared to standard EXO, particularly if you're dealing with a large quote or you deal with lots of bill of materials or kits that have optional items in them. Fixing line numbers was really just to correct a defect in EXO where if you copied information from one quote to another, it created duplicate line numbers which sometimes affected quotes, so that's really just a fix. Resource allocation I'll come back to in a moment, and we can talk about transferring cost or timesheet lines. So if, let's go up to my master job now. So put in some timesheets. Again, this is really just a time saver. So let's say due to a data entry error, some transactions on a job are on the wrong job and you want to move them to a different job. So there's a standard feature in EXO where you can right-click on any line and move it to another job. You find the job and it does it, and that all works fine. When we first developed Job Cost Advantage, it wasn't possible to do that for multiple lines at the same time. So you would want to be able to go tick the lines, mark lines, move to another job. That is now a standard feature in EXO, so our feature is less valuable. But what you can't do in standard EXO is select timesheets and costs at the same time and move them all, whereas in bear with me, sorry. In Job Cost Advantage, you're able to move a collection of transactions to a different job. And of course, it's making a liar out of me and nothing is showing in my screen, so let me just check that. So basically the screen will collate all transactions on that job, time or cost, and allow you to pick all of them or 3 of them, move them to a different job which you can search for. Hit OK. And those transactions are moved. So it replicates standard EXO, it cancels a line on the job you're moving it from and creates a new line on the job you're moving it to, which in this case was a sub-job. So that's where that line has gone to with the original transaction date it had. Okay, so just a time improvement. The next one is a delivery docket. Okay, so the scenario that covers is, let's say your business fabricates items, and the item they fabricate is often just not a recurring manufactured item. Everything's a one-off, build that is fabricated for the customer. So the job scope might be, fabricate a big steel gantry and deliver to site. At any point in that project, you might need to deliver part of that fabricated item to a third party, like a powder coater. And also at the end, you might need to deliver the item itself to the customer's nominated delivery address. Okay, and where EXO doesn't quite fit that type of scenario is the item that we're fabricating isn't necessarily a stock code on the quote tab, because the quote tab might just be a collection of bill of materials that relate to making that item. The item that we're sending out to the powder coater might just be a bit of it, not all of it. So it's kind of hard to use the standard plumbing to create a delivery docket to do that to cover that kind of scenario. So we decided to develop a delivery docket screen which allows you to create a new delivery docket to send, a finished product or any particular component that's being worked on, either to a third party or to the customer. Okay. So we know who the customer is. We can be delivering to ABC powder coaters. The deliver to can be made a supplier, but it's free text also, so it's ABC 123 Smith Street, hi, what's their phone number, who are we sending it to the attention of, what job does it relate to, that gets picked up from this job. The site contact gets picked up from this job. You can have type of goods, who the courier is, what's your con note number, and who's getting charged. And then down here, you can simply free type what it is that you're sending. It's the, gantry frame. You can have multiple lines. Basically, save a delivery docket and print that delivery docket. It stores then a delivery docket number in the database, which can be retrieved and reprinted if need be, and basically, gives a printable document. A number of our customers are just doing this in Word or whatever because of, we don't quite have standard plumbing for it in Excel. And this basically gives you the ability to produce a dispatch docket, get it signed, and cover off all the key details that are needed within that job or project in Excel. Okay, so that's the delivery docket. I want to touch now on resource. Actually, before I do touch on resource allocations, I'm going to talk about automatic creation of purchase orders. Okay, so this feature requires a little bit more setup, but basically why it was created is, for those of you familiar with job costing, you'd know that any item on the quote tab of a job marked with a P means that item needs to be purchased for this job. Okay? And there's a standard feature in EXO called the purchase order wizard that you can run from within a job to say, right, whatever items are flagged with a P that aren't already on a purchase order, create a purchase order for. And it picks up the primary supplier, adds those items to a purchase order using the correct job number, quoted cost, quoted sell, and you can send it off. So it works perfectly fine. You can send, email, what have you. This extension basically arose because we had a customer that needed to have these purchase orders created across all jobs at once rather than by job at a time. So the scenario is, let's say you've got suppliers that have minimum order requirements and what have you, and it's going to be more efficient firstly, but also more commercially attractive to raise a purchase order per supplier for all items needed for all jobs. All right? So there's no standard feature for that in Excel, but what our feature does once activated is any item that's added to the quote tab of a job flagged with a P within some date parameters is automatically added to a purchase order, and if other jobs are created throughout the day with new items flagged with P, then those items just get progressively populated into that purchase order. The purchase order actually has a status of a purchase order quote until such time as the, so a purchase order quote is the same as a purchase order, just has a different status. And the reason why we create them as quotes is then the user, when they're ready to send the purchase order to the supplier, simply right-clicks the purchase order and converts it to an order and emails it to the supplier. That tells our software that, that purchase order has been sent, and any new items that get added to jobs get added to a new purchase order quote for whichever supplier they relate to. It's hard to show that feature in action, but basically that's what it does. It completely automates the purchase ordering process across all jobs and all suppliers, but it still provides the operator or the purchasing manager, for example, the ability to review and check the purchase orders before they're sent. Job Cost Advantage goes, I'm going to talk about integration with EXO's employee info or HR module. Okay? So often when a job is being prepared, the business needs to select employees who are actually qualified to work on that job, and it's particularly relevant in labour hire. So you need to find employees that, for example, have been inducted to a particular mine site or have got certain tickets or qualifications. And the employee information HR module can manage all that stuff, so you can have inductions to different mine sites as well as your own internal inductions. You can have skills like, or qualifications like coal board medicals, confined space, forklift driver, what have you. And you can also have, say, completed training, like, I don't have any training courses set up in this one, but you can use a combination of that criteria, which is often what's needed, to confirm that someone is qualified to work on a particular job. Okay? Now, how that relates to job costing is we have a job and we know we need people with certain qualifications working on that job, and we need to find who those people are, okay? So there's a standard resource allocation feature in EXO that allows you to assign a person or a piece of equipment to a job and check that they're not already scheduled to another job. But it doesn't do any skills-based checking, just checks are they already booked. So we added that to Job Cost Advantage. So from job costing, it's effectively interrogating the HR database and gives you the ability to return a matching list of qualified people to work on your job. We've got resource allocation. And you can see that it gives you the ability, so it shows the job, the dates that this job is planned to run for, and then you can use the filter to select people who, for example, have got their coal board medical and are inducted to that mine site, and can also have their confined space ticket. Right, so any combination of criteria relating to qualifications, skills, training, inductions, and position. So position might be boilermakers, fitters, electricians, and then you can also add to that your mix of qualifications, skills, training, and inductions. The matching people are displayed below. If they're highlighted red, it means they're already booked on another job, so they probably shouldn't be booked to this one. And if they're not highlighted red, it means they're available. So I'm going to allocate these people anyway, just to show you how that works. I'll add to that, you can include the option to say return employees, and this can include subcontractors, whose address is within a certain number of kilometres from the job site. The job site being is addressed. Okay? So what's happened from that screen is those people have been assigned to this job for the dates that we had nominated. Okay. We have a growing number of customers using that feature because the whole maintenance aspect of tickets and medicals and what have you is quite onerous, particularly mining-related businesses, and it's often done in spreadsheets or separate systems, but employee info actually is a standard, module of EXO and handles all of that stuff. What we've built out around it is the resource allocation screen and also emailed reminders about expiring tickets and skills. So if somebody's confined space needs to be renewed, then that can be managed by a reminder to say, that expires. And that reminder can be sent to anybody who's set up within the employee info system, which can be the employee themselves, line managers, administrators, whomever, and any person that that reminder is assigned to will receive an email. That email can be scheduled to be sent a certain number of days prior to that expiry, and it also can be set to a certain number of reminders. So you might want 2 or 3 follow-up emails after the first one. Okay, so that's job cost advantage. A bunch of stuff there that just sort of enhances what standard EXO does and also integrates job costing with the HR module. And then lastly, we want to talk about timesheet advantage. So timesheet advantage is basically looking to improve the way timesheets go to jobs, particularly from a data entry, review and approval process perspective, also from a payroll integration perspective. So we have a number of customers using job costing integrated with EXO payroll. But the way it integrates out of the box is okay, but could be more elegant. So you can enter timesheets right now to any job. Pick up people's stock codes, put in their hours, determine whether that's ordinary or double time, what wage rate we're using, and save that, and then subsequently check that and send it to payroll. But the data entry screen itself is a bit limited. It isn't showing you totals for a day or an employee or a week, and it can be a bit clunky using multipliers, and a couple of other things as well. The other thing it doesn't do is it gives you the ability to enter leave or add allowances to a job, both of which is pretty commonly wanted. So timesheet advantage does that. There's a manager module and there's an employee module. The employee module is basically designed for businesses where the employees enter their own timesheets, which is probably not that common, but a professional services style business might use that. The manager module is pretty much for everybody else. When we set it up, you determine who the managers are and or who the data entry people are. So somebody who's set up as a manager or a data entry person, you drag and drop the people that relate to them, and that gives that manager the ability to review and approve and edit timesheets for these people, and the same for a data entry person. You can also choose what pay rate multipliers and allowances and things should be available in Timesheet Advantage, because there'd be some things that wouldn't apply. So it just makes the data entry process a bit simpler. I just need to log in as a normal user. Sorry, just bear with me. Given Greg the wrong menu. Okay. All right, so from a review approve perspective, what we're trying to do is give the operator, manager, a quick snapshot of what's entered currently. So for the selected date range, which automatically defaults to the pay week. So part of the setup is to nominate what's the first day of the week. Obviously, if you're on a weekly pay cycle, if you're on a fortnightly pay cycle, it's basically still going to show a week at a time by default, but you can change it to any date range. What's been entered for each employee so far, job hours, payroll hours, how much of that's billable, non-billable, total cost, chargeable value, and any disbursements. Okay? There is a data entry screen. And the data entry screen for timesheets can be set up as a weekly layout or a daily layout, depending on how you get your job cards or timesheets back. So this is the weekly layout, and looks a little bit busy, but it's fairly self-explanatory. So again, starting with that first day of the week, we've got job type, percent complete, customer, stock code that's come through on the timesheet, days of the week, payroll-related information. Good thing about this is you get a total per day, total per week, total per job on each line. And in addition to that, you can see that apart from time going to jobs relating to chargeable work, you can also book time to an internal job relating to leave of any leave type. And in addition to that, we can have disbursements at the bottom of the screen, and those disbursements can be allowances that ultimately get paid to the employees through payroll. They don't need to be allowances. They can also just be a disbursement that you want to cost to the job to on charge to the customer. Let's say, for example, a kilometre rate for travel. So the entry process is pretty straightforward. You're basically entering, jobs down the page and hours across the page. Pretty straightforward. The colour coding, you have different colours to represent where this transaction or timesheet is. So it can be not approved at all, in which case it's white. It can be approved from a payroll perspective. It can be approved from an invoicing perspective. It can be approved from both, and it can be written off. If the job is read-only, then the whole line goes red. Job being read-only means, say, for example, that job has been set to complete. Okay? So the manager can enter, review, approve anything for employees that are linked to them. And you'll see, if needed, you can actually include plant because some businesses track time against plant. That's either just costed or charged out to the client. The daily view is more like the data entry screen in Exo, except hopefully a little more flexible. And it can work on start-finish times and calculate the hours, or you can just enter the time. So this is probably the screen that you'd use for entering daily timesheets or daily job cards, and obviously you get a running total for the day. All the rest of the information is the same. When it comes to preparing for payroll, usually what's pretty important is firstly for the timesheets to be checked and approved, and a good way to filter that is to say, right, let's see everything that's not approved, and then you basically approve what's left, and this list would shrink until everything's approved for that week, okay? When you've got to that point, then the summary screen is really designed to show what the breakup of each person's pay is going to be, taking into account that we need to deal with the different pay multipliers, for example, ordinary time versus time and a half versus double time. So you get a quite easy to read graphical view of that. Also, the breakup of pay rates. So an employee can have up to 9 different ordinary rates of pay in Exo payroll, and you would want to see how many hours at the workshop rate or the site rate or the penalty rate. And depending on how many are used, these columns automatically increase, as well as a breakup of leave taken. Okay, so annual leave, sick leave, long service, what have you. So pretty much you get presented with the screen that from a payroll perspective you'd be using as your final check before this information is posted into payroll. The solution is automatically checking if there is a pay open for this pay period in Exo payroll, and if there isn't, then you basically can't export these timesheets. So it's kind of forcing you to make sure that that step is done. So over here in payroll, we're going to do a pay for, let's say, this time period, so the 19th to the 25th. So that page is created, and if we refresh Timesheet Advantage, it now detects that there's a matching pay. And typically you would only be exporting once your timesheets are approved. Just by way of demonstration, I'm showing everything whether it's approved or not. And it also gives a little bit of more protection in terms of what timesheets go across the payroll, because using standard Exo, it's actually possible to accidentally transfer a timesheet to payroll that related to a prior pay period or even a future prior period if someone's basically made a data entry error, or sometimes it can be deliberate. let's say somebody has handed in a timesheet late for last week's pay, but you want to at least be able to decide, are you going to include that in this week's pay or not? And you can basically do that by saying include approved timesheets that are outside these dates. All right, so once that process is done, you simply export the data. And in XO Payroll, you import the data. We'll give you an audit report of anything that's wrong, and because I'm mucking around with demo systems, I've got lots of errors, but hopefully you can forgive me for that. What you end up with in your pay is for the particular employees that we've been dealing with. Whatever timesheets were entered and approved come across with the correct multipliers and pay rates. Any approved allowances come across, and any leave that was entered and approved automatically comes across with the right hours and the right dates taken. So from a payroll perspective, there's actually not a lot to do in payroll because all of the grunt work's done in the Timesheet Advantage application. While I'm at it, we're actually enhancing Timesheet Advantage at the moment to automatically split overtime. So we can say the first 7.5 hours of a day is ordinary time and split the balance into time and a half and double time. That's being tested at the moment. And we're also looking at adding a feature to have a recurring allowance. So if an employee is assigned to a job, and they should receive a side allowance for every day they work on that job of $25, then it will automatically add that side allowance each day. So just trying to make that data entry, checking, reconciliation process a lot more efficient. So that's it for today. 3 extensions that Momentum have developed over time to make life a bit easier, hopefully make things more efficient, and I guess round out what XO can do in your business. So if you have any questions, fire away. Otherwise, thanks for attending, and we'll let you know when our next fortnightly webinar is. Well, it's in the next fortnight, but we'll let you know what we're covering. Thank you.